in social landscapes. Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Excellencies, colleagues and friends, thank you for being here this afternoon. I would like to begin by narrating a testimony of untouchability told to me by a Dalit mother in Sydney. And I quote her, "Our children, Dalit children, are prohibited from joining the same time as other children and are made to wait outside of the place where ritual is undertaken." This is the scenario where they were invited for a birthday party. They know they means the Savarnas or the upper caste groups, which caste we belong to. That's how they think we are polluting. We are untouchables. If we attend their rituals, they and the ritual will get defiled or polluted. I would like to also begin by acknowledging the leadership of the President of the Australian Human Rights Commission, and along with his staff commissioners who have shown principal commitment to recognizing caste discrimination in Australia. Their receptiveness and willingness to listen to our voices have been instrumental in opening a historical chapter, not only for Australia, but for global anti-caste human rights practice. As the lead author of the report, Caste in Australia, a Phenomenology of Casteism, I stand before you not to restate what Australian developments were. I want to speak about something broader. I want to share what the Australian experience teaches us about the global challenges of caste and descent-based discrimination, and the role minorities can play in institutional reform. Caste is not confined to South Asia. It travels, it adapts. It embeds itself in diaspora communities, in institutions that may have not even recognized its existence, and in societies that imagine themselves as caste benign. In Australia, our study documented discrimination ranging from exclusion and microaggressions to practices of untouchability, social boycott, and even physical violence because of caste. These patterns are recognizable to any Dalit or person from the communities discriminated based on work and descent, anywhere else across the world as well, be it Nepal, UK, Middle East, or even South America. This study informed us that caste and descent-based discrimination is a transnational system of descent-based discrimination and hierarchy that reproduces itself wherever people migrate. It follows people, and therefore human rights and anti-discrimination protection must also follow them. The foundation of this research is based on leading methodology in the field of social sciences, and I will not go too much into detail. But Excellencies, I strongly believe that this evidence-based, grassroots-led research could be a best practice to address caste discrimination in global diaspora. Later experiences of minorities are not marginalized voices. Our voices are empowered voices, because we centered our lived experiences on the foundation of knowledge generation and finding the reality of casteism. If caste discrimination is global, then the reach of anti-discrimination measures should also be global, to cover those diaspora communities where caste discrimination prevails and is practiced. This vision is grounded in human rights-based approach, aligned with CERD, CEDAW, ICCPR, the Durban Declaration, and the UN Framework on Minority Rights. It is not grounded in politics. It is grounded in acceptance of the problem and a call for collaborative and collective action. In this consequentialist argument that I'm making, I attempt to counter the opposition to the recognition of caste and descent-based discrimination within the CERD framework and broadly within the international human rights law framework by a few member states, unfortunately. The opposition to the recognition question is unfounded, according to me, as the premise of the logic of such opposition is that caste is not race. It is only a domestic problem and not an issue outside of spatial geographical location, that is South Asia. The autonomy of normative foundations of international human rights law is not dependent on domestic legal formulations. Though they are, of course, reified mostly from state practice, the domestic implementation of the ratified international law norms is a duty on the states. In this regard, General Recommendation 29, as Professor Chung also mentioned, of the CERD committee, did not, on caste and analogous forms of descent-based discrimination, did not equate caste and race as the same thing. What it correctly did was point out that racial discrimination is just not about race. Racial discrimination is a broader umbrella which encompasses other enumerated grounds of color, descent, or national or ethnic origin under Article 1 of CERD. The approaches in international human rights law to recognize caste and descent-based discrimination under the living instrument doctrine is therefore to not equate semantics, but rather exactly do what the Constitution of India, enacted in 1950, 15 years before the CERT Convention, and other constitutions have done so before the CERT Convention, is that they have an anti-discrimination law with list of grounds. When looked at from this perspective, what I theorize as an outcome-oriented approach, that the attempts by anti-caste actors, UN treaty bodies, governments outside of South Asia, is to achieve legal protection to what was recognized 75 years ago in Indian Constitution and other constitutions. That is, to prohibit caste in foreign lands where it has now become a reality due to the export of discriminatory attitudes with migration, as strong empirical evidence indicates. This claim is not rhetorical, but is grounded in solid facts. The Australian process of undertaking policy reform through rigorous human rights evidence architecture strengthens this argument by plainly stating that that it need not be a controversy to extend protections of anti-discrimination laws to any multicultural group that faces discrimination in diaspora. This is not a personal attack on any particular dominant community or a particular country, but a process of reclaiming the fundamental human rights of Dalit people. We refuse to be excluded, we refuse to be discriminated and treated as unequals. Our human rights issues cannot remain contested. When Dalit communities organize, produce evidence, and assert their dignity, when the voices of the oppressed are centered, the policy transforms. And when a country takes caste seriously, it encourages other countries to do so. To conclude, the argument and the argumentation and the project that I've just envisioned today and outlined before you is a project of counterclaim. It's a counterclaim to the very dominant knowledge-producing forces that, at their very whim, can allow or disallow the language of caste itself to create the meaning of the social and also the reality which suits the hegemonic project of deciding what is to be known and what is to be unknown. This meta-contest must be fought and contested with truth and truth alone of our voices and of our lived experiences. In the end, I will conclude with two recommendations. First, I call upon member states to follow the Australian example and undertake empirical evidence-based policy recognition of caste discrimination. And finally, I urge the UN to promote evidence-based interventions on caste discrimination outside of South Asia in diaspora communities. I thank you.